What if the agency you work so hard to build isn't the one you actually want to run? That's the question Arleigh Vasconcellos found herself facing after 16 years of leading a successful full-service agency with a big team, high-profile clients, and everything that looked like success from the outside. But inside, she felt misaligned and quietly disconnected from the joy that started it all. In this episode, Arleigh shares what it took to realize that her version of success had slowly drifted out of alignment, and what it looked like to stop, reassess, and build with intention. You'll hear what happens when growth starts pulling you in the wrong direction, how to spot the early signs of misalignment, and what shifts when you finally give yourself permission to specialize. This isn't just a story of pivoting. It's about identity, courage, and rebuilding a business that fits who you are now, not who you were when you started. If you've been feeling stretched thin, stuck in a version of your business that no longer fits, or wondering how to pivot without burning it all down, this episode will meet you where you are and offer a way forward. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you want to grow an agency to 7 figures and beyond without working more hours in your business, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Audrey Joy Kwan. I know what it takes to build an agency, including supporting an agency owner in selling and exiting. I also have a master's degree in communications, specializing in organizational development. My team and I have worked behind the scenes of multiple 7-figure agencies and have coached and consulted with over 150 agency owners. All this to say, when you join us on the Small But Mighty Agency podcast, you get real-world experience and practical tips that help you work less, earn more, and lead with integrity. So let's go. Hey friends, welcome back to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. Today we're digging into a question so many agency owners wrestle with. Should you stay full service or finally make the leap into specializing? And I've got the perfect guest to explore this with us. Arleigh Vasconcellos has been in the industry for over 2 decades. She ran a successful full service marketing agency for 16 years before making the bold decision to pivot and specialize in PR. Now she leads Roar and Whisper, a demand gen PR consultancy for B2B and tech brands. We'll unpack what sparked the shift, how she navigated the transition, and what's changed for the better since narrowing her focus. Arla, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Audrey. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. What made you start as a full service agency?
That was an evolution. We originally started as a PR firm and only focused on PR because that's where my background is. That's where my training comes from. Prior to starting a PR firm, I'd worked in-house for a bunch of big global brands in Whistler, Blackcomb, and in the UK. So I actually started really narrow and it was great. And we focused on PR, we focused on tech and startups and mainly just in Western Canada. And then we kind of grew to be across Canada. But we became victims of our own success. So as we started to scale and grow our reputation, clients would say, "You did a great job at that. Can you do this for us too?" And I guess myself as the founder and owner of the firm, I wanted to scale and grow and I was hungry. So I said yes. And I kept saying yes. And for 10 years, I said yes to everything. And by the end, we were a full service agency. We did everything from PR to websites to managing people's social media to running conferences and events. And we did that quite successfully for a while. We grew to 15 full-time team members with a bench of about 25 to 30 with our consultants and various experts that we brought on board, in SEO, in web development, et cetera. And we were hustling and I was constantly on the treadmill and just running. And during COVID, that exploded even more. And I was basically living on Zoom and video conferencing apps, homeschooling my kids and trying to hold myself together. And I don't think I quite realized how burnt out I was with that hamster wheel and that treadmill until 2 years post COVID, as we started to come out of it, and I looked around our beautiful office and I said, why am I doing this? And that's where the kind of spark of starting to really ask myself the tough questions about what was working and what wasn't, that kernel kind of started.
You mentioned the words victim of your own success. I want to spend a little bit of time there. What happens when we start to build a business? We start to say yes more than we say no. I think we lean into the yes because there's a way of thinking, which is, hey, if we don't say yes, there's going to be no business or less business in the future. And I think that's what drives an agency owner to become a victim of their own success. Were there any boundaries that you had put in place to determine the no's? Sometimes we think that we already have boundaries and that those boundaries are strong enough to help us grow a sustainable agency. But sometimes we got to get out from the other end before you really see, oh, wow, those weren't really boundaries. Those were things that I put in place I thought would help us, but it never did because at the end of the day, what we were doing was just saying yes to everything. So what did the boundaries look like for you back then, if there were any boundaries at all?
Yeah, I love the way you phrase that. I thought I had boundaries. I totally thought I had boundaries. And I thought I was saying no all the time, all the time. You know, we've never worked in consumer markets. We've never worked with lifestyle brands. You know, I used to have this line that I would say to clients, we're firmly B2B. And so, you know, we don't do restaurants. We don't do restaurant PR. And I was still using the term PR. You know, it wasn't even we don't do restaurant marketing. It was we don't do restaurant PR. So invite us to your restaurant opening. We'll come and eat your food and, you know, enjoy your drinks and hospitality. And we'll tell all our friends and family what a great time we had. And we'll help you with word of mouth. But we won't do your PR. And I thought that was a boundary. It wasn't. You know, we were being sent RFPs. A classic example that I use is we've got people often know and refer to the Calgary Zoo and the Wilder Institute. And they're a fabulous place to visit. And I love it. And I take my kids there and I buy an annual membership. And we were sent an RFP to compete on a PR campaign for them. And of course, we had to submit because we'd been invited to submit. And, you know, I did it and I thought about it. I thought, I love the Calgary Zoo, but I want to just go there with my kids and see the animals and support their conservation efforts. I don't want to do their PR, but I would have said yes to that because it loosely fits within our mandate. And, you know, my boundaries kept expanding and expanding and expanding, and I justified it. And I think it was because I had these obligations I felt the deep, I guess, sense of accountability towards the team, towards the people that I employed, towards keeping the lights on. I talked with a former client a few weeks ago, and he's been through a similar journey to us and is a successful entrepreneur. And we went for a coffee date walk, and he's like, yeah, that payroll number, like, it haunts my dreams of, I got to make this every month. I got to make this every month. And he said something that really resonated with me, and we commiserated together of like, we both at some point along the way just lost our joy for why we'd started what we'd started in the beginning. And it was all of the big scary things around, I got to make this quarter add up to this number. And I've got to make, you know, this month add up to this number. And if I don't, it's there. I don't know. I didn't even know what the repercussions were. You know, it was like, it was failure.
What really stood out to me is you were not just saying yes to PR work. You were saying yes to all the other things that weren't related to PR, whether that was paid digital ads, maybe it was SEO, maybe it was content marketing, all the things that may not have been fully related to PR. And because of that, it sounds like you had to build an enormous team behind you to be able to deliver all those services. And because of this team, now it's this upkeep where it's like you've built this, for lack of a better word, a beast, and then you have to make sure you feed the beast. In this new pivot, you've stripped it back to the basics, so to speak. And you've stepped back into just doing PR and really just doing PR, as opposed to saying you do PR, but then saying yes to all this other work. But the challenge with that yes is it creates a business that you never really wanted in the first place. And it strips you of the joy.
So to be really philosophical about it, I think part of me did want the beast.
Mm.
And I don't think I would have, and we wouldn't have created Roar and Whisper and what we've built now if I hadn't said all those yeses and run on that treadmill. Because I think I always would have wondered what if.
Mm.
And there's a lot of, maybe I'm older and wiser now, but there was a lot of ego tied up in that. And so this stripping back, it's been a journey, and it didn't happen overnight. You know, it's been a journey over the last 2 years, and it's required a lot of introspection on my part. I've also needed to let go of a lot of ego of what was expected of me. And I had some amazing mentors and I still do, and amazing clients that I call friends, you know, like the client that I just went for a coffee walk with and whatnot, that I value their opinions. But I've also come to realize that listen to advice, take it in. But at the end of the day, it's not about feeding yours or someone else's ego. It's about making the decision that's right for you.
Let's unpack that a bit. You mentioned there were a lot of learnings from this path that you've taken. So looking back, what do you think were the biggest cost, whether it's time, energy, or opportunity of being this full service agency for too long?
I think the cost first and foremost was my own well-being, my own mental health. I burnt out, and then I went beyond burnout. I've always been a doer. I've always been well, it's okay. I'll just work harder. I'll just do more. And I mean, it's a classic type A personality. And most people who build agencies are they're very much that classic type A personality. And I keep referring back to that treadmill. It's like, well, if I just do more, it'll be fine. If I just do more. And so I didn't even recognize my own burnout while I was in the throes of it, because I leaned into all of the tools, whether they served me well or not, that I'd leveraged in the past of, I'll just do more work. I'll just push through. It'll be fine. And I think it was when I finally hit my breaking point, and I don't know if it was a really good friend of mine. And she just said to me, she's like, Arleigh, you've lost your spark. And you've always had a spark. What happened? And it caught me off guard, because it was like, no, I still have my spark. I'm fine. And then when I really thought about it after, you know, we'd had our dinner and I got home, and I was like, I'm avoiding doing things that I used to love. And it made me realize that I wasn't showing up. I wasn't showing up well as a leader. I wasn't showing up well to my family. I wasn't, you know, it's always your lowest points that make you realize, how do I change and what do I need to change? And so it was a gradual process to dig myself out. And part of it was retreating back and learning to say no.
Yeah. It wasn't you one day woke up and burned it all to the ground. There was a moment of realization where you realized the agency that you built wasn't the one that you truly wanted. And so then there's this journey of creating the agency that you really do want. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that transition. What internal shifts had to happen to make it possible for you to now go from being this full service agency with 15 team members and I think you said 20 consultants, 30 consultants.
Too many.
What were some of the shifts that you took, whether it was team or service delivery or some other aspect of operations to make this shift successful?
Yeah, I mean, I love how you say, I didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, I should burn it all to the ground. And I did fantasize about that at times. I'm like, oh, what if I just lit a match and off I go and it's nothing's my problem anymore. I think my sense of obligation was too strong. So it started first with being more firm with saying no to certain things, being more firm with saying no to projects, being more firm with saying no to opportunities that didn't fit. But that did feel very suffocating because it was like, we're not going to hit revenue targets. We're not going to, there was all the doubts that crashed in with that. The second realization was stripping away the things and the services that we didn't want to do. Could we do them? Yes. Did we do a good job at them? Yes. Did anyone love executing on them? No. So stripping that away kind of came next. And then it was gradually realizing we needed to streamline the team at the same time as streamlining clients. That's always tough because you love the individuals and care about them. And I maybe didn't approach that in the best way. Instead of just cutting the cord and sort of letting people go, it was more of this slow, long breakup of, well, we just don't really have much work. And there's a reason why I think companies do mass layoffs or do, approach, hey, we're downsizing in a different way. And that was definitely a big learning. But we were still struggling with our identity and who we were and what we were going to do. And so we started to think about what we were really good at executing, what our clients came back to us for over and over and over again. And we kept coming back to PR, but not PR in the traditional sense. And I've always had this philosophy, and I talk about it all the time, that the type of PR that we execute on and that we do is extremely strategic. It's extremely integrated into our clients' actual business goals. And it's not name and lights PR. I've never been about, hey, I'm going to get you front page news and get you coverage all over the place. Because to me, that's very tactical and it's not strategic. And it's not actually getting your client in front of the audience that actually is interested in and cares about what they're selling. So we started to really think about that. And it was a current client who we've worked with across a number of organizations now who really helped us to get there. He's a great human and he's like, you guys are too good at what you do to fail. I want to see you succeed. And getting that vote of confidence is everything. And it really meant a lot when that happened. And so he's like, but I think how you guys are framing it and talking about it in the world you're not talking about it the right way. So he came in and did a workshop with us and he's a CMO himself. And really, he did what we do with him and his team, asked us hard questions and forced us to answer. And so we realized that the PR that we offer is very much in the genre of demand generation. And it's using these new AI tools. It's using the massive shift that's happening in the marketing and advertising and PR and, all of our sectors to work smarter, not harder. And I know it's a cliche to say that.
Lots to unpack there. I want to start with this concept of having to bring someone else in to help you gain some clarity. And I want to normalize that because I think a lot of agency owners have a really strong background in marketing and oftentimes hesitate to find someone else who might have a similar skill set and bring them in to help with the clarification. But I truly believe that as business owners, it's really hard when we're inside our glass bottle to read our own label. And so I want to highlight that because I think that's what you did. You saw that, hey, I'm in this glass bottle. I can't read my own label. I need some support to figure that out. And I think the beauty of that is it got you further faster because you could have spent a lot more time stewing about positioning. What do we do best? And mulled it over and over and over again. But the reality is by bringing someone in, it shortcut your time frame into figuring that out. Okay. Now, the other area that I really want to dig into, of course, making all these changes internally is exciting. And for you, it felt like this is kind of the right direction. However, your clients might have had a different outlook because maybe they felt that what you were doing they need, and the shift would definitely impact them. So how did clients respond to you when you went back and said, hey, look, we're no longer a full service agency anymore. By the way, we have always been PR focused and we're going back to our roots, which is PR. And even more so, here's the actual type of PR that we do. How did they react to that? And did you have to let any clients go?
So to touch first on the bringing someone in, that was such a blessing because we were navel gazing and I knew we weren't talking about ourselves in the right way, but I just didn't know how to get us unstuck. And asking for help there's never anything wrong with asking for help. And it's then taking that help and that support and that advice, but using the pieces that work for you and owning your own story and owning your own difference and owning your difference. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to ask for help from someone that it's like, well, I get paid to do what you do, but they have a different worldview. They have a different mindset. They have different experiences, and they approach problems from a slightly different way than you do. So no, it's not that they get paid to do the same thing you do. You're bringing someone in to help you broaden your worldview. In terms of clients, yeah, we lost quite a few clients, and there was people, and I think I subconsciously was almost doing it because I don't think I even realized that I'd started to say no, or and this is hard to admit, but almost sabotage proposals and stuff, probably subconsciously, even knowing I was pricing them wrong, knowing that I was offering what we wanted to do for them and what I knew their solution was that they needed, but it wasn't necessarily what they were asking us to do.
Internally, you want the business to go in one direction, and you've got proposals on your desk that are leading the agency and you into the opposite direction. I think over time, what's going to win is that deep desire. And I think what's really interesting is hearing you say that you really start to recognize that deeper desire and take action on it. Because if you kept going down that path, you would have fully sabotaged your agency and, left with zero. But instead, I think letting go of the clients that weren't the right fit, and also not getting the clients that weren't the right fit, allowed you to build the business that you have right now and feel like you can go all in on it. And I think that's really important, because anytime you're building a business where some part of that vision no longer aligns with who you are now as a ambitious type A person, it's always going to feel hard and sad and unjoyful. And I think as a business owner with a ton of skill, like 16 years in experience that you've had here, oh my goodness, there's a lot of value that you bring and a lot of opportunity for you, and to not tap into that opportunity by not listening to your inner voice and what you truly want, that's truly the waste, right? I think the best analogy is if you think of an arrow and think of pulling that arrow back in its bow. When you pull the arrow back, it feels like we're going backwards. But when you release the arrow, it actually goes forward faster and with more force and with more impact. And I feel like that's the description of you taking a moment, and maybe more than a moment, to really determine for yourself what joy in the business was. And sure, there was time that you spent self-sabotaging, but that also gave you an insight into more of what you don't want to do, so that you could spend more time on what you do want to do, which overall is part of that arrow being pulled back and then now released into the future. So you guys are going forward with that much more power and impact.
Absolutely, Audrey. Absolutely. And I don't think we would be, I would say, I think our arrow is still pulled back where, maybe in the point of releasing it, we figured out our messaging, we figured out or maybe it is released. We figured out our place in the world, but now we've got the the new journey, the new hard work ahead of us of we've got to build a new roster of clients. We've got to start doing our own marketing and our own sales. And that's something that I realized in our past iteration. We didn't do as much as we should have. We relied very heavily on referrals and networking, and not that those aren't valuable. Those are very, very, very valuable, but we didn't toot our own horn as much as we should have and could have to broaden our network. And so now we've got the hard work of building that new network.
Yeah. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm all about community relationships and network. And I think that the future of marketing leans heavily into relationships and also leans heavily into having a specialized position with specialized messaging. So having a specialized message to me means that it isn't just more noise. It adds value to the industry you're trying to serve and creates impact for people. That's a true message. And so I love that you tapped into that, because for me, when I think about doing more of your own marketing as an agency means really getting clear about your voice, what you really want to say, and then going out in the world and making sure that it's heard.
Yeah. Maybe the arrow's in flight. It hasn't landed.
The arrow's in flight. And so the arrow in flight is always a good thing, because it means that you're not stalling in action, you're taking action forward. And right now, as a specialized agency, what benefits, both expected and unexpected, have you seen since locking all these things down?
The expected benefit is that knowing our identity and knowing who we are, as a team, we're really focused. We are really focused. And now we're not afraid to say no at all. And I think that's probably why we're not scaling as fast as we'd like to, because we're saying no more than we're saying yes to projects, because we've always been, and my philosophy and my mantra has always been to be a partner with our clients. The session that we went to today, talking about being that CMO, that fractional CMO for your clients, I've always inadvertently done that, but now we're being much more intentional. Myself and the rest of the team are being much more intentional about doing that. So I think that's been the known benefit. The unintentional, I've had a lot more feedback from people in my network and folks that I haven't maybe stayed as close in contact with as I should have, and just people that I respect in the industry in general applaud me and applaud the team, applaud us for being brave, but also really getting that the industry is shifting, and our bravery in taking that leap to shift with it.
I just want to give people a bit of context. You mentioned the session that you were in today. Just some context for listeners. Arleigh is part of Agency Together, and Agency Together has sneak peek sessions into what other agencies are doing. And she's referring to that session. In case anyone's wondering, what session are we talking about? Arleigh, I want to ask you one final question before we wrap up here. If you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently about this pivot?
I don't know if I would do anything differently. I think, we all would love it to be that big red easy button and, just hit it and snap your fingers and magically everything shifted and changed. But I think the time it's taken, I think the ups and downs, all of the reasoning and thinking through the good and the bad that's come from it, I've learned so much, and you learn so much from your successes, but you learn even more from, I don't want to even say your failures, but your opportunities that don't always go the way you plan them to. And I don't think I'd be where I am today and wouldn't be excited about what's next and what we're building if I hadn't gone through everything in the way that it unfolded. I know that's probably too, philosophical for a lot of people, but
I hear what you're saying, and I truly love it. I think what you're really identifying with is that everything that you went through had its purpose. And without all of those steps, the purpose would have never shown itself. And you wouldn't be right here with this feeling that you have today, which is the fact that you've taken the right steps for you, and you're in a place where there's a lot more joy in your life. And I think that was the ultimate goal for you, and the ultimate goal for business owners and agency owners in general, for all of us, is to build something that we really enjoy going to. And when I say going to, we all go to our businesses, we all show up for our businesses. So really, we're all in it to build something that gives us joy. And it sounds like for you, all the steps that you took were very necessary to get you here today.
Yeah.
I know I said that was the last question, but this is going to be the last question. Can you share one belief that had to shift in you as a founder in order to make this pivot work?
One belief that had to shift within me.
As agency owners, I think we all have a belief.
Yeah.
How agencies need to be built, how agencies need to look like. And was there one belief that really had to shift in order for you to make this all work?
Yeah, I think, and while I was in the thick of coming to the realization that things needed to change and needed to be different, I was very hard on myself in thinking that I'd failed because I'd scaled the agency to a certain point, and I'd scaled to a certain level, and now I realize that we hadn't plateaued or stagnated. I think it was that I already subconsciously knew that what we were scaling and building ultimately wasn't what I wanted, but I wasn't ready to admit that to myself. And so it was coming to terms with that ending, but also not being too harsh, my own harsh critic, and saying that this was a failure, is actually reframing it and looking at all of the successes that I'd achieved and that the team that I had helped us achieve along the way. I mean, we won international awards for our work. We attracted clients from around the world. We achieved earned coverage when earned coverage was going the way of the dinosaur in leading international publications. So celebrating all of those successes and realizing that they weren't done in vain. They were done at the time for the right reasons. And so it's not failure, it's just change and difference and something new, and celebrating that new.
Thank you, Arleigh, for sharing that. Now, where can listeners learn more about you and the work you're doing now?
I'd say the best place to find me and find the team is on LinkedIn. So if you look up Roar and Whisper and myself, Arleigh Vasconcellos, we're pretty active and we're starting to scale on there, and we're starting to be more bold with posting our opinions and posting how we can help with this shift that's happening with the industry and the sector. I think that's probably the best place to find us. And then obviously our website, roarwhisper.com, but it's more of the follow-on information. If you want the pulse on what we're doing, look for me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arleigh. It was a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me at the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app and share it with a friend. I'll see you on the next one.